Hello, and welcome to episode 27 of Trails in the Pod. I'm Colin. That's Kevin.
We have an action-packed, awesome podcast today on Chapter 8 of Trails in the Sky SC. But first, let's have 15 minutes of dead silence.
Is this a subtle jab at the structure of Chapter 8, Kevin?
It is not subtle, Colin, because the structure of Chapter 8 is shit.
See, I kind of knew that you were going to react this way. Because, like, all last episode, you're like, next chapter, we're going on the Aureole. Let's fucking go. And I was like, remember, we have a finale. Keep your expectations in check. There's the orbital shutdown. You're like, we're going on the Aureole. Well, we're not going on the Aureole just yet.
No, we're not. So, what we're doing in Chapter 8 is the consequences of the orbital shutdown. Well, semi consequences. The main plot for the first part is we had to go reconnect the Bracers Guild with the zero field generators. And that makes me wonder if this is a reference or it's connected to Trails into Zero, something to put a pin in. Because the army and the government, they're being connected. Now it's up to the Bracer Guild to re-establish communications. And so that's what we do. We start in Belze, we go to Roland, Zeiss, Ruan, and Belze, no, Grancel, in a pretty fluid order to go about the kingdom. And like Colin said before we began, this is the most open the game has ever been.
Well, I said that off camera, so the listeners don't know about that. But yeah, this is an incredibly open chapter. Kevin and I took two different routes. Uh, I believe you went to Roland and then backtracked through Bose to hit Rouen, then Zeiss, then Grancel. Whereas I went to Roland, ran through Grancel, did Zeiss, and then did Rouen, and then had to run back to Grancel. And I think that the fact that they're giving us that ability kind of it reinforces the notion that this is one land that's all connected, as opposed to it being a bunch of different subzones that you visit chapter by chapter.
I don't want to bring up video game scale, Colin, but I'm going to.
Okay.
So within the whatever representation and diminishment of distances, is it possible to walk a day, the entirety of Libero? How long is the orbital shutdown meant to have lasted? Because, being a bit more serious, it being solved in a day or two does not add much or enough gravitas weight to make Chapter 8, this part, needed, useful, I don't know. But if it takes a week or longer and we get the feeling that society is starting to fray, that this needs a solution quick, today, tomorrow, that would be good. But I don't know how much is abstracted.
Yeah, it's an interesting point to make because this game has gone out of its way to show, okay, now the characters are going to bed. Now it's a new day, right? We've seen that multiple times. We don't see that happening here. So the conclusion that one should draw is that we have ran across this entire kingdom in a day. Um, of course, we have the benefit of having the fast forward button to make us run very fast so that it makes sense. But in normal speed, I can see how this doesn't make sense. And it's definitely, I think it would hurt the pacing that way even more if we took full advantage of what this chapter offers. Because it is quite clear to me that there's a lot of hidden, quote unquote, hidden side content in this game. Because every time we go to a Bracers Guild to like hook up the phones, the receptionist will tell us specific areas that we should go in order to help out. Kevin, did you ever go to any of those places?
No, I did not, because one, I'm a dumbass. Two, they weren't in the very first one when we got them in Bose, so I thought, oh, I don't have to pay that close attention. All I gotta do is figure out which one am I gonna, sacrifice. They don't have arts anymore from here on out. And so the whole, Royal Academy side of it completely missed.
See, I also did not do them, and I feel kind of bad about it. And the reason why is because the first time I played this game, I also did not do them. At that point, it was because I had put all of this time into the game. I really wanted to see what was going to happen next. So, okay, let's go ahead and just power through so I can get to the end of this chapter. The same was kind of true for this, except that it was more podcast pressures because we decided that we wanted to record this today and we both played it yesterday. And you're leaving for New York City tomorrow. So there was not exactly enough time for me to do it all in one night if I did all the side quest stuff. So I felt like I shouldn't do that. Also, it does kind of help the feeling of urgency if you don't, because you're saying, we need to solve this problem now. I can't go and check out the hot springs in Elmo. I have to go to the next city. And to me, that actually makes more sense narratively. I've definitely lost some stuff. Like we're not feeling the full impact of this chapter, but I don't feel out of place for making that decision.
I wonder if there should have been a time skip between 7 and 8, take a week or two, maybe a month to get all of these generators made, and then just hand wave how long it takes us to deliver them so we can then, by interacting with NPCs through cutscenes, get told we need a solution because this is a band-aid. Liberal society will collapse if this continues.
So I guess what you're suggesting is a cutscene in which we install all of the zero field generators and then we have to go around anyway and talk to these people.
No, no, it's more a cutscene. In the intervening 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we finally got a temporary measure to restore communications. This will allow us to make a final push towards the Oriole Lake, if that makes any sense.
I mean, it
Like,
does, but I think that's
yeah,
what's happened. Honestly, the it starts off by Russell saying, "So Cassius Bright knew this was going to happen, so I made these devices. Go install them." Now, of course, it's not a time skip, but what it is trying to do is show the foresight that Cassius Bright has, which, and this is not the only instance of that in this chapter.
no, it's not. But maybe I'm getting too deep into the lore and societal implications because maybe it's my misinterpretation. Tell me if I'm wrong. The way I see it, extended period of time without the use of orbital mechanics, whatever, liberal cannot survive it as a coherent political unit because of how integrated it is into the economy, society, military, whatever. So this should be a national stop everything and get on this. And we do see it, but going back to the time, but if it's a day or two, it doesn't feel like enough time to make it truly stuff bad is happening now works better for a game or a novel or a movie than stuff
But
will happen in the next 2 months.
But Kevin, it's not like we've solved the problem. What we've done is
No.
recognize that there is a problem and have hastened to do the bare minimum so that we can keep things intact. And then the state has recognized that they need to try to fix things, and we're about to go fix them. In my opinion, the whole starting it out immediately kind of shows the urgency of the situation.
Yeah, and this is a nitpick, personal preference. I think at the end of the day, just my personal preference would be a month has gone by. We tried a couple things, they haven't worked. We have something to get the bare minimum done to allow us to make a push on the Golden City. We need you to go reconnect to allow for a throw of the die, getting the Orsay up there.
See, I think that, so for example, you really wanted this chapter to be the one where we fly to the Oriole. Yeah. And we see when the Oriole comes in that it causes the orbital shutdown phenomenon, right? That's the last cutscene of that chapter. So we need something in order to actually get there. We need to like earn the ability to get there, which is by finding a way around that problem specifically. I don't think that adding a month time helps the pacing of the story or helps even the characterization of our characters because number one, if you give Weissman 40 day or 30 days in order to fulfill his plans, we're fucked. And number two, I can't see Estelle just sitting there saying, "Oh, this doesn't work. I guess we're gonna wait."
Yeah, or think of it like this. What if all electricity in the US stopped working today? Tomorrow, it would be, like the calm in the eye of the hurricane. And a month from now would be, we're deeply fucked unless something changes. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, I hear you. I guess what I'm saying is that it makes complete sense that our characters are jumping in. They know that, and they are jumping in to try to solve the problem now, as opposed to waiting a month when it becomes a major problem.
Yeah, I just want things to be more difficult to up the stakes and amp up the pressure.
Well, just you wait till the finale, because there are some hard boss fights, if I can remember well. So don't worry about that.
So we've talked about obliquely, but we came to a conclusion, or at least means to move on. The big complaint I had about the pace from chapter seven, the Oriole, to how I had thought, and I still kind of think, but less so, how chapter eight feels like a brick wall pacing wise. So you say this is not a pace break, it's a natural consequence. I say now I see more where we're coming from, a bit less, but I still see it as a bit of a pace break. So I think that we can just move on to the second component of the chapter.
Or yeah, so we have two main sections left. One is the invasion of Grancel by Ouroboros, and one is this Olivier reveal. And both of them are like pretty high octane, high stakes. Pacing is very swift, which is kind of at a mismatch with the first part. And of course, the first part you can make that as slow as you want. You can make it a lot slower than we had it. But the invasion of Grancel is like you get to that moment and it like the stakes feel rough, like shit's going down. You feel pulled back into the action in a way that I think that even chapter seven didn't do. I mean, I how many times did I text you last night how cool that scene was? At least two, three times. And then I also said it today when we were planning this episode. So I want to hear your thoughts on the invasion of Grancel.
Okay, so I thought visually the direction was good. It felt like an invasion. We see the guardsmen go up in the gates of the city, they get utterly demolished. We see every attempt the royals make to stop, well, then slow the invaders fails. The best they do is maybe delay them a couple of seconds, but in the end, they get everything they want. It felt, I don't want to say futile, because that implies something bad, but the juxtaposition between the cutscenes and then us, the party going to Grancel's with the aftermath, what's the good version of futile? It felt inevitable.
I don't know if this like the outcome might have felt inevitable once Ouroboros got there. What I really like about this scene is that it really highlights the power of the enforcers, especially the enforcers working together, which is
Yes.
really it's important because we had just kind of sort of beaten them in the last chapter, and once you beat an enemy gameplay wise, you think that you're stronger than them. They kind of lose the sense of danger. And this narrative relies on us thinking that these enforcers are very dangerous. And clearly, we're not done with them yet. So the game has to remind us how almost superhuman they are. And I think this section does a really good job of doing it.
I want to ask you a question based off that, Colin. So, in the end of this part, we get to the gates of the castle and they all come out, all four enforcers. And for the moment, it looks like we're going to fight them
Mhm.
before they leave. If this was a boss fight against all four enforcers at an appropriate level increase compared to chapter 7, would that be a winnable fight, do you think?
All four of them together? No, probably not. I mean, it's not like there's much difference in levels between the end of chapter seven and the end of chapter eight. There's not a whole lot of fights you have to do in chapter eight. There's like two optional fights that I had to do because they were in my way. Other than that, and then it was the final boss fight at the end, which was pretty easy. So no, that would not be a winnable fight. Maybe you could take on two. It also depends on what kind of support you might have. I mean, I'm even trying to remember because once you, this is flash forwarding a little bit, but once you get to the end of this scene, you're saved by Alan Richard and you're saved by Lieutenant Colonel Sid. But even something else is also coming to help convince convince the enforcers that this is just going to waste too much time. They should go. And I don't remember what that was. Maybe it was Alan Richard arriving. Do you remember?
Oh, now we have something where looking at the exact words can be useful.
So for those who want to know more about that comment, so Kevin has found a very useful site, lparchive.org, in which it's a text-based let's play through the game that will have all of the dialogue. And so he sends it to me. And my reaction to that is, why the fuck would we need exact words? I just played this yesterday. Um, we're both of an academic background. I should have known better, but this seems like a perfect reason to go and check my work.
But Richard and Sam don't beat them. And at least to me, I think it's pretty clear that when the enforcers depart, it's under their own volition. It's because they can't be bothered, and the real activity is taking place up in the sky on the Oriole.
So looking at the text here, yeah, we definitely didn't beat them. However, the addition of Alan Richards specifically makes it so that the enforcers decide that it would take too long to stay, to fight. So they decide, all right, really our goal was to delay you, so we're out. And I want to know, what do you think about that goal?
What did they gain by delaying them however long that wouldn't have been done if they skipped going into the castle? I can't think of it off the top of my head. You might, because you know what happens, their plans more than I, but I don't know. Not sure at this point the game does. But I want to talk a bit
Look,
about Richard and Kanone.
before we do that, I just let me respond to what you brought up. The only thing that I think that it can actually be in reference to is not to Weissman's plan himself in the Aureole, but it's going to have to relate to the Erebonian threat that we're going to face next. That's the only reason why delay makes sense.
Yes, and then because we know that the society does have links
Yes, but
with Erebonia.
we'll talk about that. I know that you have some stuff you want to talk about with Kanone.
I don't like the redemption of the intelligence division remnants going back into a store order. I mean, yeah, we talked about last game, and I quite like how Richard is a true patriot. I don't like Kanone not being a blind psychopath homicidal follower who's angry at Julia. I also don't really like Richard getting quasi redemption. I want more consequences. Shit can't be just forgiven because you somehow escaped or were set free and then came here and did some sword fighting.
Well, it's pretty clear. It's not like he escaped. He's there under the direction of Cassius Bright. This was part of his
Yeah.
plan. Uh, Thinking about, look, we like to think about things from a realpolitik perspective. Alan Richard is an incredibly skilled individual, skilled tactician, skilled swordsman. Did he try to overthrow the last government? Absolutely. If somebody was not as talented as him, he should die. But we are now facing this like otherworldly threat that is threatening to destroy the fabric of society as we know it. And they're working in cahoots with our biggest rival, Erebonia. Do you just throw that man away? No, you probably don't. And by extent, we have seen his loyalty to his subordinates. And so keeping his subordinates around is the best way to get to make sure that he cooperates.
You mean the secret ancient society that he was working with two
We
months ago?
we don't actually know how much he knows about Ouroboros. We know that he was working with Lieutenant Lawrence, and we know that there was some help given, but we don't know their exact relationship. And plus, it's not like Cassius Bright. It's not like Cassius Bright didn't know about Ouroboros.
That was a bit snarky of me. I don't know. I see it. You may be right. I, on a personal level, don't like it. You know what I do like?
Crushing your enemies?
You know what I also like? Everything that comes next.
Yes. I mean, so I remember you were complaining about this chapter, and my words to you were, "Have you beaten it yet?" And when you said no, I said, "I am not saying anything until you get to the end." And it's because of this.
Chloe gets a new sprite with a new purple long coat. Is
Best
that
part of the
it?
game. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Something else happened too. I forget what though.
I feel like so we had this missing character, Olivier, something, Oliver, something like that. I feel like he might be involved.
Yeah, it's in a Broadway musical.
All right, what the fuck are we doing?
Okay, so we get the reveal that Olivier is actually Olivert, the prince of a prince of Erebonia. He says he's not the crown prince.
So I feel bad for our listeners because we kind of have already spoiled this reveal because you had already played Cold Steel, so you knew this. And so we referred to it a couple of times. I will say, when I played this, my mind blown. I did not figure this out. I was like, it was completely flabbergasted.
Yes, but beforehand, we get not a Chloe reveal, but a Chloe interjection. And we disagree here about what's the effectiveness slash her basic competence, what's going on, Colin.
So you're speaking. So first, let's outline the situation because we keep talking about it, but we haven't actually described it. After Ouroboros invaded Grancel with the stated aim of kidnapping the queen and their heir. By the way, we didn't even talk about Duden and Philip. Philip's a badass, and Duden kind of redeems himself a little bit, so that's good. Um, but once we kind of get the Ouroboros enforcers to stop being pains in our ass, they tell us that we have one last trial, one last test, one last threat we got to deal with. And then we hear the report that Erebonian tanks are on the border of Liberal. Now, mind you, they're also impacted by the orbital shutdown phenomenon. Their tanks are operating on steam power, which is power that has not been used since before the orbital revolution happened, which means that Erebania knew this was going to happen and prepared an invasion force.
Yes, so we get a comically evil general who is an eye patch. He is so coded as evil. He comes,
No, he's
makes
not.
basic threats about, oh, let us in. We're concerned. We can help keep the peace. And then Colin, Chloe comes. She does this dramatic reveal. She's been investitured as the heir, and then she gives remarks the game wants us to think is really awesome and throws the general for a loop. But Colin, they're a stupid person's idea what a smart person sounds like. I'm sorry.
So maybe I'm dumb, but let's go through this because first of all, I don't think that Zex Vander is coded as evil. It's pretty clear from the end of our of the talk with Olivier that his heart was not in this at all, but he is a loyal soldier of Erebonia and was therefore following orders. Number two, I mean, plus there's also the real national security threat of what the fuck, Liberal just knocked out of half of our power down in the southern reaches. There is a problem there for sure. But also, I mean, I think Chloe does a really good job at providing Vander with the cover he needs to not invade immediately without anybody losing face. And that's important.
It just seems facile and banal. I ask you to consider your actions. It just seems facile and banal. What I ask is for you to consider your actions. I assure you, Skipping, that in Liberal, its stuff is bad. She talks about how they're investigating. And, like, yeah, they make sense, but it's not worth the wow, what a canny, cagey political animal reaction she gets.
Well, I mean, so the other thing that we were facing with is General Morgan, like yelling at Vander, which is the natural reaction. obviously Erebonia should not invade, but at the moment they're looking for any pretense to invade. And they have a pretense to invade. So it's Chloe's job in order to argue him into a corner to get him to not invade, which she does for the most part, and then Olivert comes in to kind of help out. And I think a pretty genius way of first arguing with Vander from the right and then generally bringing everybody back to the center.
Yeah, I get that, sort of. I just think it'll be something we have to disagree on because the reveal is what's really important.
Yeah, that's the
And
best
it
part of it.
was, and I knew I played Talks 1 first, so I knew sort of what was going on. But I looked through our chat history, Colin, and I found my very first communication with you about Olivier.
Mhm. That was a long time
And
ago. Have you been saving all
yes,
of our texts?
it's from the Messenger. There's a record.
That's true. Facebook doesn't throw away anything.
So I sent you a screenshot of a scene in which Olivier is being himself, which is weird. He's like, in truth, dot, 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 I am ever on the hunt for that elusive mayfly we call love. But that might raise eyebrows at a girls' school. I sent a picture of that with just the words, and then I said, this guy's fucking weird. And then you were all like, you spoiled yourself. You should have chosen this guy first, but he's awesome. But I can't tell you why. I was like, no, he's weird.
But now I think you would agree that Olivier is one of the best characters in this entire trilogy.
He is absolutely amazing. And we see a side of him here we've never seen before.
Correct. We've seen hints. There are times in which, like, the serious side of Olivier comes out when he's talking on his cell phone, for instance, or the time that he outwitted Shara by getting really drunk, but still dragging his hangover ass out of the inn in the middle of the night to go help with the bandit fight. You know, there clearly this is a man with a mission, with a rationale and a purpose that is masking a lot of stuff behind this facade. And here we see maybe not the facade drop as more as another facade is being put on. It's difficult to tell, but we're seeing him operate in a context that he's very good at.
A different mask, I think, is a more precise term. Facade feels fake, whereas mask, it's the role he adopts as befits the situation.
Yes, absolutely.
And he's harsh.
He's harsh, but he's saying harsh things in order to give the like. Here's what's going on, in my opinion. Olivier has the goal of stopping the invasion, but he knows that if he comes in arguing against the invasion, the whole military establishment behind him is not going to believe him. So he has to come out as a hardliner and allow himself to be negotiated back by Chloe, which he does very well. Like, he really plays it off. And he does that by knowing that Estelle will not be able to keep her mouth shut. And then Estelle runs in to get into the negotiations and act as an arbitrator. And even though Olivier is able to point out some of the flaws in Estelle's logic, it's still enough that he can take that as a reason to delay the invasion, which is, I think, really good diplomatic realpolitik.
He's not playing for the audience in Olivert.
No,
Not
he's not.
really. He's playing for the hardliners, the expansionists, which on the one hand we might think is odd. They're in the military, they may be dukes, counts. He's a prince, not the crown prince, but he is a son of the Emperor Eugene III. So you think that would outrank them. But there's a chancellor involved with him as well. That even we get this more hints. We saw it with the embassy a couple chapters ago, but the chancellor is someone so powerful, not even a royal prince of the blood can just go out and gainsay him without having events worked in his favor beforehand, without meddling in events to get the situation resolved the way he wants.
I mean, the chancellor is certainly acting as the head of government and has the most political power out of this whole thing. But I mean, this is a common feature that we see in empire, especially those that claim to be absolutist. is that there's no such thing as an absolutist empire. What you have are a bunch of people that possess power that go against each other. And what matters is the specific maneuvering in the specific situations to bring the ends that you want, which is why Olivier cannot come up as a peacemaker. He has to come out as a warmonger because that's what's going to work the best with the situation behind him. Even though, yes, he's Prince of the Blood. I'm not sure how much formal authority Prince of the Blood has. What it does have is status, which creates respect, but respect has to be wielded carefully. It's kind of like charisma in this way. I've been thinking a lot about charismatic rulers later. Maybe we'll do a sidebar on them at some point. What one thing that I find really weird about Olivier, though, in this moment, is that he's playing for an Erebonian audience right until he gets what he wants. That he turns around and like reveals to Zex Vander his entire thing. Should we imagine that he's projecting at first and then comes down to a whisper when he's just talking to Vander? Or is something else going on? Because it seems like he's just revealing his whole hand.
It has to be projecting versus a more normal conversation because otherwise he just cut out the position he built right out from under him. Just wasted all of the capital he used to portray himself as a horrid liner.
I mean, I guess one thing that it does is that, speaking mano a mano to Zex Vander, it's like showing him that there's another way that you can't just walk in and talk about. Like you have to get to that certain position and then do a wink and a nod to this other influential political figure and to show him, hey, we're both actually against this other guy. Let's join forces.
It's a weird extension of trust because at this moment when there's a crisis, you would think he would only parcel out information in as small a dose as possible to whoever needs it and not give anything extraneous away. But here, Olivier is openly telling Zex that he's against Osborne and his policies.
Yes. We even have the syntax in order to indicate whispers, which is parentheses, which they use in order to talk between Olivier and Vander halfway through when Olivier first gives ground and then they like whisper like, oh, don't worry, this is a courtesy we're paying to a minor power, it's going to be fine, right? That's a whisper. And so I'm now looking through this transcript, and Gilead Osborne, he is not whispering, right? He is saying it in his normal ass tone of voice.
The very picture of a monster, I would say. That's not something you can easily take back.
No, the cold-blooded yet bold reformer. He does define Vander as a neutral person, so that's important to know. But yeah, this is like it's weird in that he seems to be in one side and then flips over. Maybe that's poor writing. I feel like the game is trying to show us the political situation in Erebonia in order to help make this scene make sense. And on a second look, it's doing it in a little bit of a clumsy fashion.
It's giving us info dumps and asking us essentially to have opinions on the information that we just learned. But it's all too abstract, I fear. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I do for sure. I think that it's playing off of the idea that you will catch some of the references that they're making. I mean, it's not the first time that Osborne has been discussed or referred to. So we
No.
can pick up some stuff like that. But also, I mean, Olivier calls him the Blood and Iron Chancellor. And anybody who remembers their high school history class should immediately recognize that this is a reference to Otto von Bismarck. So that kind of gives the player even a vague schema of who this guy is, even if we haven't seen him yet. Once you start talking Blood and Iron Chancellor, you're thinking realpolitik, you're thinking military expansion, you're thinking smart as fuck dude who's a big threat.
Yeah. They make clear that's a departure from Bismarck for Mr. Osborne. he's very much not a fan of the aristocracy. He is very much a social reformer.
That see, we do need to do a sidebar or two or three on Bismarck at some point, I think, in order to really investigate this. Because while yes, Bismarck is part of the Conservative Party, he's a Junker. He believes in all of these German nobility stuff. He also introduces a lot of reforms in order to stave off socialists and communists during his day, which is at least in action what Bismarck, not Bismarck, what Osborne seems to be doing as a reformer, just with different ends. So that's something that we should talk about. I don't know if we want to talk about it when we have like a lull in our topics or as we get closer into Trails of Cold Steel when it becomes a little bit more like center stage because we're in Erebonia. But that's something we should talk about multiple times.
I'll pencil my calendar for 4 years from now.
Cool.
That joke never gets old. Just like you wait till Trails the third.
I have I
Boo!
haven't said that once this episode. And honestly,
Give it time.
when I told you, I say it for two reasons: to get your reaction and because I'm telling the truth. And I could, look, if we want to be vague enough, I can look at the scene and say, this leads to something that happens in Trails the Third. There is a scene that you'll see, and you might think that I should have said it here, but I'm not saying it here. I'm not saying it here.
So, what more from chapter 8 do we need to talk about?
I mean, I don't. So, one thing that we should talk about that you have marked down here is that uh, you felt like the Grancel invasion was a bit of an intrusion because it was centered on the mundane, whereas you don't feel the intrusion in this scene, even though it is also centered on the mundane. So I want to know A, why you feel an intrusion at all, and B, what the difference is between these two scenes.
So, the intrusion, and maybe I'm just getting too caught up in polarities that are not polarities between the mundane and the fantastic. Like, this is a magic realism setting, whatever, that magic can coexist with horrible science, whatever. But I felt like the Golden City, the towers, the visual design of the towers, it felt not of reality. This Golden City is not normal. It's weird stuff that cannot be explained is happening. And then another rendition, second verse, same with the first, of go to Grancel, try to take the royal family hostage, just felt a bit like, yeah, I've been there, done that. For the scene with Olivier, one, we see how the society is on a political destabilization, which is the same thing with Grancel, but the Olivier being such a central component elevated the scene. It made me like, yeah, this is awesome because the Olivier stuff was awesome. Whereas the Grancel stuff didn't feel quite as unique.
What I really like about this chapter is that when you finish chapter 7, if you haven't played it before, you react like Kevin and you think, okay, we're going to the Aureole. We're going to continue with the supernatural bend. And which is what you expect. That's how the genre has expected us to react to these events. What chapter 8 does is continue to remind us that Zemuria is a lived in place, that Liberl is a lived in place, and that the what has happened has an impact on international politics, has an impact on people's daily lives. And it makes us see that. Even people like us who didn't do any of the additional content, we still see some of that. And I think it's really important that they showed us that before we go and fly off and finish the game. It's to me, that's part of what makes the world building special, is that it feels like what happens in the world has an impact on the world.
Oh, I agree completely. And this ties into one I would have liked a bit of a time skip. But let's not get into that quagmire again. And then so I do see this, how Grand Soul, it's yeah, it could be repetitive, or we could see it as more of a tragedy they had this happen again in such a short time frame. What they've tried to move on from the first coup, the city was laid waste to. And so there's a melancholy. These are consequences. So that I do like that. I don't know. Maybe I would have liked it better if it wasn't Grancel, not that city.
Sure. Kevin, I got one final question for you, and then we'll wrap it up, I think. We're about to enter the end of the game. We had the entirety of first chapter. We had 8 chapters of second chapter. We're entering the finale of second chapter. It's called Trails the Third. It's not called Trails the Third Chapter. So these two games are units together in and of themselves. What are your hopes for the finale? Character wise, story wise, dungeon wise? What are you hoping to get out of it?
I hope that Joshua and Estelle's arcs end on a satisfying note. Not perfect, maybe not even okay, but we can see the road to okay if they're not okay, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
The lot, I hope that for the other characters, I hope that Tita gets some development that may be unrealistic, that may be more magical than anything we've seen with the Golden City.
Wow, that is ice cold.
In a more serious note, I hope to be a bit vague, I hope it sticks to the landing. This world, this part of Zemuria that we've come to see and know with the people, I hope the triumph feels earned and the victory is tinged with some losses along the way. Not death, but I want it to feel like an earned victory, and you have to work for it.
All right. Anything about specific characters other than Tita that you like? Like, are there any plot threads that you want to see resolved?
I want to see some more spooky shit with Kevin. They've been commenting how he knows a lot, and it may be veering on a bit too much. The way he appears right when they're needed before he joined the cast full time. I want to say maybe he's a protagonist. Maybe this is Trails the Third, third chapter. Maybe there's a bit of a break, or he does something, and maybe something gets revealed about what he did. I don't know. I just feel like the only other Growl's Richter we've seen from the novel was someone who loved killing and who turned that into a good cause. But like end of the day, still loved killing stuff. So I wonder if there's something about Kevin that he's gonna do or that he's did or about who he is that makes him a bit darker than Estelle, who was a very light, ontologically good moral protagonist, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, and I'll be curious to see how you react to the finale. I think that the ending is quite good. I really like the final chapter, but I want to hear your reactions to it. Before we sign off, not all of our listeners are on Twitter, so we should probably let them know what's up. For example, why do they have a Chapter 8 podcast right now as opposed to a sidebar, even though this is second week of December and we just had Chapter 7 last week? And the reason for that is that Kevin and I decided for the month of December, we're not going to pussyfoot around anymore. We're finishing this game. The finale episode will be out next week. And then on Christmas will be our review of the whole game, right? We're going to be done with SC. In the beginning of January, we're going to have some sidebar episodes on the novels that are in the game, Gambler Jack, the Doll Knight, because as we've seen with in the last game, these novels really do a good job at world building and they provide us with things to think about. So we want to talk about them. And also, there is already a Trails anime for Trails in the Sky FC and SC that neither of us have seen, but the reputation is that it is hilarious. So we will be watching and reacting to that.
118 minutes to tell the entire story of SC without setting up the first game to begin with. You're asking viewers, plopping them in with no context, telling an abridged story that when it was released Not even FC, from what I understand, had been localized yet for English. So they have nothing
Oh, I didn't
to
even know about
anchor
that.
them.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun ride. Um, be that as it may, so I'm thinking after we do that, maybe we take the rest of January off and then we hit Trails the Third at the beginning of February. What do you think about that, Kev?
That sounds good. Rest, recharge, play some other games, and just, yeah. The Sora no Kaseki OVA came out in 2011,
And when did Trails FC come out in English?
2012.
What the fuck were they thinking? All right, I am really looking forward to watching that. You have no idea.
Yeah, it'll be a blast. We should watch it with copious amounts of alcohol.
We should also see if there's a way that we can like sync what we're watching. That might be a fun thing to do. But yeah, I mean, there will always be copious amounts of alcohol when I'm concerned. So
I think that's it. See you next time, Colin, for the finale of this game. I I cannot wait, but at the same time, I'm sad because I won't be able to ever not know what's going to happen
it's true.
again.
It's true. You will have SC under your belt, and it's one of the best games ever made.
Cannot wait. I'm Kevin. That's Colin. See you next time.
Thanks everybody for listening. Bye bye.